we're going to have a period of question time, which is going to test me because I won't be able to see who is wanting to ask a question. But you can ask a question of Patrick number 1 or Patrick number 2. And I remind you that Patrick number 2, Patrick Daniels, when he was here last time, not only did he talk about British Petroleum, but he also talked about AOL Time Warner. And I record with thanks the fact that at least 6 or 7 funds in this room received back some of the money that they had lost out of the actions of this firm, and we thank you for that. So, where's the first question? I can't see anybody, actually. You've absolutely stunned them into silence. So,
I think it's St. Patrick's Day and we should go get a drink. What do you think, Mavis?
So, I was going to... Pardon? There is a... Oh, we found one. Have we? Have we got a question?
No, I'm not changing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I'll just make something else all
Patrick?
sweaty, so I might as well. I'm planning on going to change.
Yeah, I see you.
Patrick, Mr. Chairman, hi. Colin Tate from Investment and Technology magazine. Perhaps you could speak to the topic a little more in terms of your grim picture of the current scenario in the US, and what's your crystal ball say in terms of the kinds of cross-claims that are going to take place, organisations that are likely to collapse. The Bear Stearns was obviously pretty concerning, but the latest rumour is Citibank is on the brink of collapse. Can you speak to what this might mean and where you think it might all finish up?
Well, I was trying to hear you, and you asked, what I saw this whole situation, kind of where it leads to, and what's going to happen. Well, I think like some of the earlier blow-ups, it's going to take some years to recover. I'm optimistic, like others, that it will. The problem with this is it's so different than anything we've ever had because we don't know where the bottom is. People say, oh, there's all these assets that are sitting there, and these banks are still holding them. They've just written them down. Well, really, we don't know. We don't have any idea, with the matrix being broken, of what they're worth. And so that's just a tremendous problem. This stuff with Bear Stearns is so stunning. It is to be trading at $30 on Friday, sold for $2, with the Fed coming in with a $30 billion backup. It is, I've been doing this 20 years through the meltdown with the savings and loans, the high-tech bubble and the blow up with the telecom and other things that we've had. And there has never been anything as stunning as the events of the last few days. I mean, it was bad enough, these write-downs occurring, and that every big CEO of our biggest banks, is out the door. But to have something like what's happened in the last couple of days is really stunning. And really, it's rocked the pension funds, the union pension funds, the Taft-Hartley funds, as well as the public funds in the United States. And so they're stepping up to do something about it because they don't think that right now our government regulators or the SEC, let's take the SEC for example. Let's take Enron as a perfect example. The SEC recovered about $400 million. That's not bad, but the SEC can only get, in our country, penalties and disgorgement. They can't get damages, so they rely on us, on private enforcement. On average, they get 10% of what we usually recover in cases. Now, they can distribute those back to victims, and they're doing that in certain cases. But we rely in our country, on private enforcement. And I know that a lot of these funds have sometimes 30-35% invested overseas, and maybe a good chunk in our markets. And I think it's worth paying attention to, especially even if it's just the claim form process. But as far as where this is going, we don't know the bottom. There's going to be litigation. It's going to be led by the biggest pension funds in our country. It's not going to be, Joe or Mary or Sam. It's going to be the New York State pension fund, the Ohio State pension fund, or things like that.
Much more serious, perhaps, for global markets than Bear Stearns would be the collapse of Citibank, which has been rumoured to be the case that it's insolvent. What would the fallout from that be if that were true?
The fallout against the other markets around the world?
Of Citibank collapsing.
Citibank collapsing? Well, it would impact us directly as a law firm, for one thing, but they still got to fund the $2 billion they agreed to pay in Enron. If Citibank collapsed, I think you'd really have to worry about any bigger than anything we'd ever. I don't know when it would come back. I mean, we're really worried, and I'm glad that Merrill is not as worried, but Bear Stearns wasn't worried. Not on Wednesday of last week, they were still making positive statements, and now we've had a complete disappearance of the fifth largest bank in our country. So I can't imagine that happening in Citi. They've done a good job of going, overseas to get the funding that they needed, and they had those relationships, luckily, built up for years, and so they've done a good job at that. And so certainly everybody's trying to do the best they can in this situation. It's just such a non-transparent. I mean, usually if you have a fraud, you can see what it is, how far it goes, and what it impacts. But here, we just don't have any knowledge of the depth of it. So.
I've just learnt something, that if I stand over there, I can actually see people there. So I'm just asking for the next question. I'm going to look there, and then I'm going to go over there so I can get a question from here.
Mavis.
Oh, we've got one from here. Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis. Anna Booth from the Board of Members Equity Bank. Until recently, Patrick, the third largest securitiser in Australia of very good mortgages, in fact, rolled gold mortgages. And I asked this question for that reason, that we've been rated similarly by the ratings agencies as some of the loans that were securitised and have been the subject of the subprime meltdown. So what are the consequences for the rating agencies, including liability, and what actions do you think they should be taking to clean up their act in terms of the ratings that they give that investors rely on?
Well, that is a great question, because in the United States, the rating agencies almost have complete immunity. It was set up for a purpose so that they could speak freely, and they literally, even though they're owned by other big companies, there is just really no accountability right now for the rating agencies. They've been sued by a couple of funds under a couple of different theories, but I'll tell you, there is a situation where the rating agencies were getting paid, several times multiples to do those ratings of those structured finance deals, and it's not okay. I mean, the bond insurers are now running for their lives trying to keep their own ratings up as the rating agencies, lower their ratings, as are municipalities, across our country. So it's just a disaster. And the rating agencies act like, well, didn't you read our disclaimer at the footnote on page 43 that you really can't rely, on our rating? And it is just, so we need to change something there. And right now, the rating agencies don't have the accountability that anybody else has, at least under our laws. So it's a bad situation. And I think that nobody could fathom it. I don't know if anybody understood that what the rating agencies were doing, that they were actually in there, setting up those tranches, especially the equity tranches at the ends, and they would say, no, the banks did that, but evidence has come out in several cases that are in litigation where the rating agencies were actually in there because they had to get those high ratings to get those fees, because the higher the rating, the higher fee they got, and so that there's something wrong with those things being tied together, and that's really what happened here.
Up here.
Hi, my name is Bob Smith from the Timber Industry Superannuation Fund. If you were God for a day, what actions would you take to try and fix this to make sure it doesn't again, or reduce the probability of having it again?
Well, I think that there certainly has to be some regulation. I mean, I heard an earlier statement where somebody asked that same situation, well, what can we do so it doesn't happen again? There has to be more transparency. There has to be some rules about splitting this type of, I guess we look at it now and we see it so easily, and I'm sure that it wasn't. Obviously, some of the smartest people, on Wall Street couldn't see it. But you can't have something that is just set up by an algorithm and just goes one way. Everything depended on the housing market continuing to skyrocket, and the banks were making so much money off of the securitizations and selling it and squaring it and then cubing this and then selling it to the pension funds, and it was just they couldn't stop. They literally couldn't stop themselves. And of course, the worry is that the Fed stepping in like this, it's like, saying, okay, you private sector and you screwed up, but the government's going to come in and back you up. And what will not happen then is that we won't get the regulation we need, the transparency that we need going forward. And the main thing we need to fix is the rating agencies. And the second thing we need to fix are the bond insurers and the debt insurers, because the pension funds around the world rely on the debt and the servicing of that debt.
Ian Martin from State Street. A question back on Bear Stearns. JP Morgan's essentially acquired them for nothing. They've made a call on the future value of their portfolio and perhaps the liquidity that they can bring to managing that. But what I don't understand is how in the space of 4 or 5 days they've been able to assess their future legal liabilities that are going to be associated with that purchase.
Well, they called us on Sunday and asked us about what it was. No.
Hello.
Of course, that's factored in to it, and I think really what happened is they couldn't assess. That price that was paid it's more than 1/3 less than the building that they own. And so that's not including any of their assets. I mean, certainly what they're paying for is the potential liabilities, or why they paid nothing. Why it was just handed to JP Morgan is they've taken on liabilities. But to get a guarantee from the government, and I haven't seen all of the details, they're just coming across now. But how they could have assessed their liability, well, the easiest way you could do it is you take that market drop of, let's say it was 110, I think, when a gentleman by the name of Joseph Lewis invested billions of dollars into it because he thought it was at rock bottom at $110 a share. And you take that and say, hey, what was the market loss of, trading at 110 when you got over 100 million shares outstanding, and so you have, more than 10, well, you have billions at stake. So they have billions of dollars in litigation risk. Is it as much as Enron, the $30 billion there? No. But defense firms would be able to say, hey, what was the market loss, the outside exposure, and then bring that down. I think what they really couldn't judge is what was the exposure to the, to the debt, to the collateralization, the securitization, and they just could not assess that. And so Bear Stearns couldn't assess it, and neither could JP Morgan, and that's why that was sold for a song.
Patrick, Mark Robertson from Host Plus. We've heard about the outgoing payments to the outgoing CEOs of the major investment banks, but about a month ago, the new CEO of Merrill Lynch was on television defending the record high annual bonuses to the investment banks at Merrill's to keep their best and brightest together. Have you got any comment in regards to the bonuses that have been paid in the last 12 months to investment bankers on Wall Street?
Well, I mean, they're obscene. Now I say that, and I've just applied for the biggest, attorney fee in history in the United States, so I know somebody's going to be yelling at me in a second about it. But I didn't lose. I won. I got $7.2 billion. I didn't lose $7.2 billion to get paid. In fact, I don't get paid unless I win. And so I think these pay packages, as people are being laid off and put out of work, and foreclosures are rising and people out on the streets. I mean, it's just outrageous. And how O'Neill could walk out the door with $160 million as his company's crumbling, I just can't understand it. So it's outrageous. It's outrageous, and I don't begrudge anybody making money. In fact, if those CEOs do a good job, hey, let them make all they want. I heard that, we look at the slide, CEOs are overpaid. Hey, if you're doing a good job and you're making money and people are happy with you, that's fine. I just don't understand when you get fired why you make twice as much or 10 times as much as you ever made when you were there. There's got to be a change in that corporate governance. And the only way you're going to get that change is to start changing the bylaws, and that's what some of the suits that we bring. And, we're trying to do that more and more now, especially with the way the boards are put together.
I'm going to jump in here for a second. One of the executive compensation is probably the single hottest issue that really gets investors in the U.S. and in the UK angry and motivated to take action. It's not just in subprime, and we kind of went through it pretty quickly in the British Petroleum case, but it was a very significant point that when Lord Brown got forced out of the company, part of his severance that he attempted to walk away with, the government wasn't going to take it away from him. The board of directors wasn't going to take it away from him, but it was some motions that we had pursued on behalf of the London Pension Funds Authority. Unite Here is a big industry fund in the U.S. to deny those bonuses or to force him to give back some of his compensation, and we were successful there. He withheld or forfeited about $16 million worth of compensation that he was claiming he was entitled to because of the huge liability that he had created through his action and through his tenure as CEO. He'd probably inflicted $3 to $4 billion worth of losses on BP. But that's just one case. But there's an example where by instead of just yelling about it, those two investors took action and got involved and were very vocal and got involved in a legal strategy that could pursue or claw back some of those things. So that's the example of that case, is if you're paying attention to those issues and pick the right time to get involved, you can have an impact.
Right. Nobody likes litigation. Nobody likes lawyers. Nobody likes to be involved with them or even around them. Most of the time, and it's certainly understandable. And so one of the things that the big funds in the United States have been doing, let's say the UC Regents, who we're closest with, who we did two big cases with, the Enron case and then Dynegy, where we got several $100 million back for investors, is, I don't know if they'll ever do another class action. They stepped out to do a bunch because they thought that was their duty. Do it the right way, get certain changes. Enron was gone, get certain changes at Dynegy for corporate governance and things like that. And now they pursue what we call individual actions. They get together with other large funds, and for example, in AOL Time Warner, they lost $400 million out of their pension fund, and we got them $200 million back. Well, that's a pretty good return, because in AOL Time Warner, the market loss was $240 billion. The settlement was $2.4 billion in the class, which returned a penny on your dollar, not half or 50 cents that we got the Regents in that case. So I think that if you take turns doing it, you can shape corporate governance, and you can fulfill your own fiduciary duties to your fund. You don't have to do it all the time, but if people take different turns in doing it, you can get good corporate governance. And once you force a BP to adopt a health, safety, and environment matrix that is tied to compensation, well, that's just going to springboard into other boards, and you only need to do it, in a number of big companies to get it done and get it accomplished. And maybe you do it. How do you stop this from happening again? Maybe you get the chance to do it in the course of litigation against the banks in this case.
Christopher Andrews, I'm from Macquarie Real Estate. In the US, one of the oddities seems to be this Fed put, the idea there's a number of federally sort of secured entities such as the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. Do you think there's because of this sort of socialist or sort of command economy almost, that if all goes wrong, that the government will solve it. Do you think that creates a moral hazard that therefore shapes the risk-taking of corporate executives, that they know that they can turn to the government and they'll sort it out by, putting interest rates down to zero, or as we've seen, by kind of refinancing the whole banking system?
Well, it doesn't help. I couldn't agree with you more. The system, I wouldn't have necessarily agreed with your characterization of, what, Freddie Mac or the other Fannie Mae or others were going to do there. But this stepping in by the Fed with Bear Stearns creates just that situation, in our free markets, which is really dangerous. And I think it sets a terrible precedent. Am I glad they did it? Yeah. I mean, I'm standing here today thinking, whoa, thank God that they moved quickly and decisively and did that. And I don't know if it was the right thing, but I worry about the things that you just brought up, because it creates an atmosphere of, hey, not only am I risking other people's money, but when it all goes to hell, the Fed's gonna come in and save me. Oh, and I'm still gonna get my $100 million and go off into the sunset. So it's not, it's a terrible situation that's occurring, and there's no accountability, especially at the top right now. So.
Well, and what you're describing, and then what Patrick just described, I mean, one of the great people that we work with day in and day out is Bob Monks. And he has spent the last 40 years railing against boards to attempt to make them more independent, to hold executives accountable. And it's been in only the last 5 or 6 years that he has pretty much set aside the corporate campaigns, the agitating at general meetings, and they focused on litigation. That he has concluded that there is just no way to change behavior except by force. Now that's his experience after 40 years, and that is what we're finding. More and more investors are coming to that same conclusion, that it's not just active vigilance to watch, but taking action, and really forceful action if necessary, to make these changes.
We're all going to be around, so why don't we, I know we're late and we've run late, maybe, and if anybody wants to ask us questions, we'll be having a beer with Mavis upstairs, and so we can answer any questions, and I'd be happy to talk in more detail with anybody that has a question.
So there's a lot of good messages to take away from here, but I think I'll just read from what was decided about executive compensation in the BP case, because we go and discuss through AXI with all sorts of boards about executive remuneration, and usually they just have a set of guidelines that they can't disclose. So why couldn't we all start saying that you have to take into account operational health, safety and environment performance in the principles to be used in calculating performance pay for executives? It would all be a safer world, and it probably would mean that some of them wouldn't get as much money as they now get. So join me once again in thanking these two. And as has been said, you can discuss this further during the frivolity that follows. And you've got to remember that you're going upstairs and not outside. And like everybody else, let me say we thank Bridgewater for the gifts this year. And it is a real change for us to give this gift. And people have said various things that are happening, but I think you just need to know that children around the world suffer enormously through war and through HIV/AIDS, and many of them are orphans. And this money that's going to Oxfam is going to provide for young children, not only to go to school, but to have uniforms, to have books, to all the things that we say here in Australia, if you don't have a good foundation in education, you can never get out of poverty. And so thank you, Bridgewater, and thank you both for this very good last session of our first day.